literally every human being on Earth, like no exaggeration, is going to talk to voice agents or whatever you want to call them multiple times a day. Over the last year and a half or so much growth for us has come from people talking to computers, not people talking to people anymore.
What happens when we start talking to machines like we talk to each other? Kwindla Hultman Kramer is the CEO and co-founder of Daily, a real-time audio and video platform that spent a decade building infrastructure for human communication. Their open source framework, Pipecat, is widely used for building production voice agents. We'll cover how GPT-4 turned a video company into a voice AI platform, why healthcare is the fastest adopter of AI agents, and how agents really work under the hood. This is the story of a founder who spent a decade building tools for human connection and ended up building core infrastructure for the AI revolution.
Hi, I'm Chelcie Taylor, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Kwindla Kramer, CEO and co-founder of Daily. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of you and the podcast.
We have a lot to talk about today, which I'm excited to dive into a few areas, but maybe let's start with a retro. Daily has been around for nearly a decade. I'm sure when you started the company, it maybe looked and sounded a little different than it is today. But given the moment we're in with AI and agents, I'm curious, when you think about what you thought Daily would look like 10 years later, does it look that way, or describe a little bit of that?
I mean, I don't think anything in tech looks the way we thought it would have, 10 years ago, and we are no exception. I mean, we started Daily as a bet on the growth of real-time audio and video on the internet overall, and a standard called WebRTC as a catalyst for that evolution. And I think that bet was broadly right. We grew a lot. Our core network infrastructure business, we power things like telehealth and education use cases where people talk to people. Yeah. But the amazing thing is, over the last year and a half or so much growth for us has come from people talking to computers, not people talking to people anymore. And the really fun thing is that the infrastructure we built for people talking to people is also what you need to talk to LLMs.
Continuously, developers were telling me that Pipecat is one of the best ways to build voice agents. So maybe walk me through kind of the evolution of that. Sounds like what you built for humans and kind of talking to other humans works, but then moving towards this kind of computer interface.
You were early seeing the potential of this new whole amazing voice space. So when GPT-4 came out, it was like a light bulb moment for me, because you could have an open-ended conversation with a computer for the first time. I mean, we sort of in text blew by the Turing test, which, when I was in grad school was something it was hard to imagine we would ever get to, maybe. Yeah. And GPT-4 just was very clearly kind of above the bar of, I can have a human level conversation with a computer. And so for us, what that meant was, well, we could wire up voice and video to that, because what we do is real-time voice and video. We've got these text mode models. How do we put the pieces together to turn that into voice and video conversations? So we built lots of experiments and a bunch of tooling internally, and some of our big enterprise customers got super excited about it, but it still felt so early. And I would often show a voice AI demo to somebody in late 2023, and there would be 3 reactions in quick sequence. The first reaction was, whoa. But the second reaction would be, they can't really do that, right? This is like a demo. It's not real. Yeah. And I'd be like, no, we're building these production systems. And then the third reaction was this really funny thing that happens at the big technology transition moments. People would be like, yeah, I don't actually think I want to talk to a voice agent. And we were just like, no, we've been in this. We understand kind of how this stuff actually can get used. Literally every human being on Earth, no exaggeration, is going to talk to voice agents or whatever you want to call them multiple times a day. Totally clear to us. But it felt early. So we were like, well, what do we do to help this grow? What do we do to kind of create an ecosystem around this? I mean, from an engineering perspective, we just couldn't not do that. Yeah. From a commercial perspective, we get paid for moving the bytes around the network at a low level. So anything anybody builds that needs us to move the bytes around the network, that's great. So we open sourced all the tooling we had built internally. And that is the Pipecat project you were talking about. And that just worked out way better than we could possibly have imagined, because it was a right place at the right time kind of thing. We had the expertise to build the hard building blocks for these super low latency, real-time, multimodal, multi-model systems. And we'd done a good job on the first generation of these building blocks. And about the time we open sourced it, we started to see this kind of inflection coming where other people were trying to figure out how to build this stuff too. Yeah. So now Pipecat is the most widely used framework for building things like customer support voice agents, but also next generation things like robotics and social and gaming experiences.
It makes a lot of sense that you saw this early because you were working in this space, but maybe double clicking a little bit on like, we decided to build kind of the hard things in the voice ecosystem. There's a lot of hard things in actually bringing a voice agent to production at scale. But if you could pinpoint a handful of like, what did you provide at Pipecat that enabled developers to say like, I want to go with them because it is a market where there's potentially others that they could have worked with?
The short list of kind of hard low-level things, and we sort of think of ourselves as like low-level engineers. It doesn't, I mean, we like the full stack. It's like really exciting to build the full stack, but like where we live is kind of the low-level stuff. And the short list of those things is very low latency, very reliable end-to-end streaming of media from the client to the cloud, through all the processing stages in the cloud, and then back to the client. So that's one. The second one is handling interruptions both ways, from people and from the bot, and making sure that you're sequencing the inference. The inference is triggering at the right time. The conversation feels natural from that perspective. The third thing is context management. You're always trying to figure out how to manage the tokens you're giving the LLM in a long multi-turn conversation. And one of the super interesting things about being in the voice space is that we encountered a bunch of these hard agent problems early.
Yeah.
Like a year ago, I would talk to my friends who were building like really good cutting edge AI stuff, and they were like, well, why are you doing this automatic context compaction? And I was like, well, when you have a long multi-turn conversation, you really have to. And now everybody knows how important context compaction is because of the rise of coding agents. So there's a long list of stuff that, just because voice has to be low latency, has to be multi-turn, tends to be multi-model, we kind of solved a bunch of stuff in Pipecat that now is like 2026 bingo card list items for everybody.
Maybe getting in kind of your projection mindset, like where do you think kind of some of the biggest updates or changes will be? Let's stay on kind of voice right now, but kind of what do you think the voice ecosystem looks like, say, in 12 months from now?
I do think the world is just very fundamentally multimodal, and in a few different ways. So I love that GPT real-time team and the work they do, and the 1.5 model they just released is like a really good model and a step function improvement on some things we really care about, like tool calling accuracy and instruction following reliability. But what we increasingly see is that for the enterprise use cases we're deploying today, and for all the things we kind of imagine coming, you're doing multiple inference loops or multiple sort of sub-agents in one agent, because you need to do things like optimize latency in the voice conversation and let thinking models run multi-turn agentic stuff alongside that. So the thing I'm most excited about, kind of as somebody who builds libraries that I use and that I hope other developers use, is what are the building blocks for these multimodal, multimodal systems?
Obviously, all of these predictions that you have will influence what people ultimately build. What are some interesting use cases or most surprising things you've seen folks build using Pipecat daily? You know,
it's funny. I am an engineer and I build this stuff for myself too. So I think sometimes my head is a little too much in the clouds and I'm not surprised enough about the sort of out there things. But conversely, I am, and I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of people have been surprised by the uptake of the more prosaic use cases in things like super regulated industries like fintech and healthcare. I mean, when we first started pitching healthcare customers of ours on some of these agentic use cases, the reaction was exactly what you would have thought. It was a lot of pushback from like CIOs and IT teams around like, well, we have to have 0% hallucinations. And we were like, well, sure, but there's all of these benefits. And that changed so quickly, so much more quickly than I expected. And the pull for using all kinds of real-time voice stuff plus other AI agentic stuff from healthcare is now maybe the fastest industry of all.
It's been fascinating to see that.
That's crazy, right? Like you and I have never seen that in our careers before, right? Where healthcare is extremely technology forward, but it's not an early adopter. Here it's an early adopter. And it's because it solves the sort of generative AI in general and voice in particular solve so many very, very big pain points for healthcare.
Yeah. I obviously spend time looking at the voice ecosystem, but also in my kind of investor hat, I look a lot at verticals. And so healthcare has been one that I've spent a lot of time in. And I completely agree with you, talking not only to health systems, hospitals, but also folks building for healthcare. The adoption there really is remarkable.
I think a big part of it is just that if you can free up time for healthcare providers to spend more time with patients, it's so valuable. And it's valuable at an economic level. It's valuable at a human level.
Yeah.
I mean, people go to nursing school and medical school to help people.
Yeah.
And the generative AI stuff is just sort of changing the balance of time where they have to spend on, things that seem like rote work versus things that seem like patient care. And that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. You talked a little bit around kind of multi-agent architecture. We at Notable are thinking a lot about kind of background agents and how do you provide inference for them and how do you think about these different approaches, maybe focusing just more broadly on agent architecture, like what do you think works right now? What are you seeing doesn't actually work in production?
I do think one of the big things that's enabled all of us to feel like we're in this new agent moment together is that all the experimentation last year around what an agent is kind of came to a shockingly simple conclusion, which is an agent is an LLM in a loop. And so across a lot of different sort of slices of how we build agents, people are basically thinking about how to manage loops well, which is a really funny, like computer sciencey thing to think about, right? But it's also incredibly powerful. So if you can wire up your LLM so that you're managing the context effectively, so we're sort of back to one of those lessons from early voice, like no matter how good the model you give me is, I'm gonna find the edges of that model. And that means two things. I'm gonna have to build that loop really well to leverage that model in this sort of agentic fashion. And then I'm also probably going to supplement your big model with some other models with like stuff running locally on my device or little like specialized vision models running in parallel with your big like LLM or whatever. And I think everybody now agrees with that. I think even at the big labs, you can see the investment in what we're calling the harness in 2026. Like it's not the harness, it's not the model, it's like both of them.
Yeah. It is interesting to see that evolution. I think on my side also as an investor, I think maybe 18 months ago there was a conversation where we're thinking, should we be investing in AI applications? Like, will the labs kind of take over and eat all of this? Will it eat more into the infrastructure kind of layer as well? And what we ultimately decided was exactly what you said. There's just a long tail of tasks and things that need to be done that even if the models are all knowing, there's still going to be people who can kind of harness them and drive more impact.
I think, one of the things that makes Claude Code so great is that, at least from the outside, it seems very clear that Anthropic has trained the newest generations of Claude and built that harness in a way that is a very, tightly coupled innovation loop. And that's amazing. But you can't do that for everything. I
am curious, given we've kind of gone on this thread of voice agents and we've talked around kind of agent architecture full stop, but a voice agent is an agent. They're the same. Yeah. But I think there is a lot of debate, and I think about it a lot too, of like, what is the future of voice? I think there's one camp that sees kind of like voice is the new modality. This is the way in which we're going to interact with all software. We will maybe disintermediate the actual application. Maybe there's a future world in which we're all having wearables and we kind of control and drive actions with voice. And there could be another camp that feels as though, this is very commoditized.
Really big technology transitions, multiple things are always true.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not one thing the internet is. The internet is a whole bunch of things. I truly believe that all software is going to go towards having voice as a primary input modality. Not the only one, but in most cases the main one. Yeah. And so that transition of how we even think about what a piece of software is going to be largely shaped by how we evolve these voice inputs. But I do not think that means we're going to sort of disintermediate software. Like we will have wearables, we will have embodied physical AI of all kinds, including, household robots at some point, and all the stuff that was science fiction a few years ago. And a lot of our touch points with software will seem headless because voice is enough. But we are also going to reinvent how we build software that runs on screens for voice input and multimodal output.
This is also business related, but I think something I really loved learning about you is that you co-founded Daily with your wife, Nina, who I do know and is lovely. And I always find it so amazing to spend time with you both because you have very unique kind of found thinking around how software is evolving, and in particular building Daily with each other. So I am curious, do you have any advice or for folks who are thinking about navigating potentially building a company with their partner? What are some of the lessons learned, but also I'm imagining really interesting kind of outputs that come from that?
I mean, one of my rules in life is not to give advice.
We only give predictions on LLMs and voice agents.
Right. No, I will give you engineering advice, like more than you want. But, life advice, I think, I can tell you stories, but, I don't know. It's really, really wonderful to have had the opportunity to start a company with Nina, who I'm married to. We have a 11-year-old kid and a 10-year-old company, and we've done a lot of work together on both of those things. I think the thing that makes it work for us is that we're okay with there being no boundaries between different parts of our life.
Yeah.
And that means we can kind of support each other in this really flexible way. And, startups are hard. Yeah. Lots of parts of life are hard, but startups have their own ways of being hard. And being able to kind of swap in for each other really flexibly is like great. But the flip side of that is that, we've tried various configurations of it, but there isn't like a room in the house where we go and we don't talk about work. Like that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like we're always thinking about work. And that works for us, but I have lots of friends who say it would not work for them.
Well, Quinn, this was amazing. I loved catching up with you and hearing the story of Daily and just learning about how you think about the future of AI, agents, voice, and so excited to continue this.
Thanks
so much.
Nice to talk to you.
If you want to stay ahead of the voice AI revolution, subscribe to Notable Perspectives and leave a rating. It helps more founders and investors discover these conversations.